Assalamu alaikum everyone, and Eid Mubarak for inshallah. A lot of us, at least if you're like me, you might be celebrating over the weekend, and inshallah you're at a time with your family, and you can kind of make inshallah some time out for yourself to celebrate. I know I've been celebrating today, so you can see me in traditional attire today. I've still got family over in the house, so if you do hear them, then that's that's what's happening. So inshallah. So one of the topics we introduced for this webinar was a kind of a general conversation, and hopefully we can go and introduce a lot of you who may be new to this and thinking, okay, what is strong support? What is this therapy? We've had the current legislation actually this Monday, or start of the week, which was brought about the Queen's speech, and there's been questions raised to, okay, what does that mean for faith communities? What does it mean for faith communities who are trying to find support, not just spiritual support, but also professional counseling support in this arena? And we see that the government has issued a statement which is quite clear in that the intent of the government is to protect the people from coercive practice. And of course, you know, we agree with this, and that if someone's coerced to do anything, obviously that isn't in line with any therapy or any therapeutic standard by any stretch. So that would be unethical. But we're also quite open that the government has offered a consultation. Now, a lot of people think, oh, they've done a lot of consultation, but they haven't done consultation with faith communities, with communities who actually, a population which finds itself seeking support, and they don't want to label themselves with a sexual identity. So a consultation by that means hasn't happened with those communities, and the government hasn't really engaged with them. So we hope that in however the consultation looks, that the government does look at that, so it gets a complete picture of how the ban would come in, and if a result of that ban, if there is indirect discrimination, especially to certain groups. So yes, we also have the we've got David joining us at the moment. Hi, David. Let's see, he's going on the audio. Hiya.
Hello.
Good to have you. Yes. So I'm just going through some of, you may have heard over the pond about some of Queen's speech and what that looks like at the moment. So I thought I'd kind of introduce that, because a lot of people have questions around it at the moment. So we can see that the government actually has given time for consultation, and it's a positive sign that they're saying we want to protect the medical profession, because actually we've had a lot of people, say from the gender identity clinics, have a concern, say, what can I then say? Do I have to be trans affirmative if someone's questioning their gender? Does that mean the therapy comes in there? So again, you've got several groups of actual psychotherapists who are concerned about this, as well as they've put defending freedom of speech. So if as we saw in, again, over the pond, I think it was Otto versus Rank, I think it was Southern Florida, where the judge declared that not offering therapy to, I think it was minor in that case, violated the First Amendment. So again, you see hopefully a similar thinking here, where freedom of speech shouldn't be compromised
Right.
if we have a different freedom of belief. And again, of course, upholding religious freedom. So a lot of people have kind of asked, okay, what is kind of our stance in this, and where do we stand? So you can find this on our website, strongsupport.co.uk/conversion therapy. So from our perspective, we don't believe in a sexual identity. So we don't say the best way to find God is to be straight, because straight in itself is a sexual identity. Heterosexuality in itself, you know, the terms heterosexual, homosexual only kind of maybe in the 1900s they came into place, whereas before then we understood as a man or woman having different desires, different sexual attractions. So even the concept of fluidity or having different sexual attractions existed way before this identity politics which we are seeing today, where I take upon a sexual identity and then I say, okay, and we group people by that sexual identity. Similarly, we don't use the term normal or heterosexual, because we acknowledge that sexual attractions weren't a choice. They weren't a choice for any of us in any of our experiences. But we do have a choice on how we act upon those attractions. And, you know, there's a clear difference on how I might be struggling with sexual desires and how I act upon those sexual desires as being distinct. We also have seen, unfortunately, some institutions offer promises in therapy which say, oh, we'll guarantee that you'll get, you know, a reduction and so on. And again, in terms of ethical therapy, we say at best, the therapist or the counselor allows you an exploration into the issues, which is client focused, and it's client driven by what the client wants, and there's an autonomy of the client. With any therapeutic stance, you cannot make promises of what can happen and what cannot happen. You may have scientific studies which do research and may track things, but on an individual level, it would be quite unethical to make a promise of a certain level. Similarly, we respect religious freedom of people of faith in their journey. So they're given the space and the right as a human right to explore their attractions without giving judgment of what they're trying to do. And again, this being client autonomy and client self-determination. Furthermore, we respect that a lot of the people which are coming to support are coming to us because that's what's in line with their faith, with their goals, with their personal beliefs and moral value system, and that really needs to be respected in the profession. And you know that we have the Equality Act, for example, in the UK, where both sexual orientation and religion are protected characteristics, so you cannot discriminate between one or the other. Our process is such that informed consent is very, very important at the start or contracting at the start of the relationship, where we are seeing that people are coming through their own free will. So we don't actually, strong support doesn't take referrals. We only take people who come to us directly. So we can ascertain informed consent and really get to people to why they're asking and coming here. Are they being pressured? Are they being, you know, and we have that in our initial conversation, especially in the one-to-one sessions. We have that conversation. What's your goal? What do you want out of this? What's driving this? And I think that's really important in any setting. So, you know, kind of the expectations are met. So as I mentioned, we have a variety of support services. We have group segregated groups for women's and men's. Most of these fall on a Sunday. I lead one which falls on a Thursday. And I also do one-to-one sessions for people who do need it. We are a not-for-profit organization, so we are solely reliant on donations and so on, and there's a link if people would like to donate. So without further ado, we're very pleased to have David, and I'm so happy that he can join us today. David doesn't need any introduction in the community. I've heard from so many people talk positively, and a lot of people said, Ali, you not bring David on, you need to bring David on. I'm like, okay, yeah, let's get some time from his calendar so he can join us. Now, David has you know, it's been, I think over a decade, I think he can probably correct me, of experience in this area. We're very lucky to have him, as well as SSA. He also works in addictions, gender dysphoria, marriage and family therapy, depression and anxiety issues, spiritual issues, and EMDR, for example, one of the things. So one of the things, as well as reintegrative therapy, which is kind of the, if you like, Joseph Nicolosi's Junior's, if you like, addition from the reparative therapy, and hopefully we can kind of look into what that's like and what that approach is. We can also cover things like ImTT, for example, and we can have you know, kind of a little insight into that. You can find David on his website, which is available, and you can, you know, get more information hopefully from there. So David, thank you so much for joining, and it's really a pleasure to have you here.
Well, I'm very honored to be here. Thank you for asking. I'm really glad to talk to everyone today and answer any questions you've got. I'm just happy to be here for everyone.
Brilliant, thank you. So I guess we'll start with, because I know you've lobbied in the States, because I think something that came in this week with concerns of people, especially people who are joining us, which may not be kind of understanding what this conversion therapy what actually means, and how it is an umbrella term which probably puts in something as extreme as, I don't know, like stuff which should be illegal, to something which and then equates that to licensed therapy and people, actually professional counselors, and I've never really seen a good definition of it, and different legislations across the world have interpreted it differently, and I guess that's part of the problem. But I know that you've been in one of the cases, you've been quite public on a legal level to kind of protect that freedom for people in your state in US.
Right, right. Did you want me to speak to my experience of that, or?
Yeah, how has your experience been in states in kind of bringing awareness of it, and kind of seeing bringing the side we don't really hear about in the media, about a population which doesn't quite identify with a sexual identity, but they want help to be in line with their value system?
Well, it's kind of a simple story, but it's also a complicated story. In 2012, California, where I was living at the time, all of a sudden brought the first therapy ban in the nation and in the world. And I decided immediately that I was going to become an activist politically for, besides being a therapist, I was also going to be an activist to protect clients and protect people's rights, especially according to the American Constitution, because the motivations and the actions of people who, shall we say, on the left are just nefarious, and they are actually trying to destroy something and individuals, which is extraordinarily serious in today's world, and especially according to the American Constitution. These bans absolutely violate rights to free speech, which the courts in America are now, at least in some areas, beginning to see and rule on. That's why the Florida case was so important. And so what me and my colleagues have done for the past almost 10 years has gone to many states around the United States and testified personally for senatorial and representative committees that either struck down or passed these bans. And we've been very effective. We've been part of the group that has been most effective in defeating many of these therapy bans, because we're fighting for American rights, also including religious rights for those people who are licensed therapists, but who practice under the employment of a church or ministry of people of faith. Yeah. So, and the people on the left, absolutely, in my experience, just do not know what they're talking about. They have a very myopic view of what harm is. Many of them will actually tell many untruths. They'll claim one thing with no evidence whatsoever, or they'll cherry pick research to conform it to make sure that what we do is looked upon by the whole world, which is their goal, as completely condemning and injurious to people and ruining people's lives. And they say the most horrible things, and they just simply don't know what they're talking about. So what we've done is fight for a very long time now, and will continue to do so, and testify in state legislatures and push anti-ban bills to become laws in the states and that kind of thing. And I'm also connected with many people in Europe, many of who are in Great Britain, that are trying to do the same thing. So right now, everyone in Great Britain is experiencing the more of the culmination of the violation of those rights than we are, because we put up such a good fight here. They're not being as successful as they wanted to over here, but they're making inroads. So it's extremely dangerous from a lot of different levels. So what you are facing, especially with this Queen speech, is the issues that you just raised over the last 10 minutes. I'm glad to hear you speak of that, because see, now that people want to actually make this ban a reality, Now they're having to face all the consequences of what that really means. And it's a lot more complicated and a lot tougher. And I'm not surprised. They're finally facing all the issues instead of just being so myopic on these issues. So we think ultimately in the United States we'll be successful, especially if the Supreme Court takes the case. We think they will eventually, but sometimes we just have to wait and see how it all pans out. But we're fighting very hard over there. And so any help I can be to any of you over there to fight for your rights, I can. In my opinion, we've already been down the road that you've been on. And so we've got all the documentation, all the arguments, whatever you could possibly need. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. We've already got, in my opinion, everything you need to fight these things, including answers to probably every question you would have. So if you need more information about any of this, I'm happy to help you out.
Yes, and as you put quite well, that the myopic view on, kind of, they've really not understood the nature and the difficulty of what they're saying and the populace that you're working with. And it almost seems that, as you mentioned, you are in both organizations. So we've actually tried to professionalize the field of therapy, because obviously, at least in the UK, there's a professional ban on the therapy. There's not a legal ban, but there's almost like a professional ban on it, which instead of banning therapy, which at least in the UK history, there's never been a case of a therapy ban, because that goes against every ethical framework where you ignore client freedom and client self-autonomy, and you say, oh, no, your attraction, it's never going to change. That's effectively what they're saying with this. But actually, you've had, and we know, at least maybe in the psychodynamic or in the psychoanalytical school, years and years of research into this. It isn't something which is just, suddenly there's this. No, there's peer-reviewed articles, there's science, there's research. And bodies like the Alliance, and at least in the UK, IFTCC, they are trying to come together to regulate, to protect clients, and I always think surely it's better to provide guidance to people, and professional guidance, peer-reviewed articles, scientifically sound articles, rather than just shut something off because one minority or a minority of people didn't have or haven't had an experience, or what they've gone through isn't, maybe in some cases isn't even therapy, it's but it's right. It's this umbrella term. So I think right. I'd like you to maybe touch upon, like, as you mentioned, you've got a lot of literature which is already there, and I'm guessing that's because of the network which the Alliance kind of provides, and the support that then it provides therapists like yourself who are kind of courageous and going against this tide.
Mm-hmm. I'm not sure what you're asking me, though. You're asking me to talk about what now?
So in terms of the role of Alliance and like a professional body, and how, maybe I know the body has a framework which the therapists adhere to as an ethical framework. So there's consistency between, kind of what the client experiences, or the ethics and the values that are brought.
Okay. Well, the Alliance started a long time ago by Dr. Nicolosi and his colleagues, and we're always defending client rights for autonomy and to be who they believe they truly are and develop into that, not what somebody else, including us, thinks they should be, but who they believe they truly are. So everything I'm going to tell you, the people on the left will say that we do the exact opposite. So I'd recommend that whenever you hear something that is strange or sounds terrible, that you check it out and check the facts, because there are so many resources, whether it's therapeutically, from a client's perspective and the anecdotal evidence, research, or the associations. Like I'm a board member of the Alliance. You can check out all the information you need on the Alliance website or on my website. On several other websites that have client testimonials, because everyone needs to have the accurate information. So that's what we've got to do, is to fight with the pursuit of truth and be open to all views, but verify what the evidence actually says. The term conversion therapy, every time somebody says that, I strongly suggest, whether they're one of the people that's in support of us, our viewpoints, or the opposite, I suggest that they use it as a teaching opportunity to teach that there really is no such thing as conversion therapy. Conversion therapy is a highly charged political term now used by the left to try to make sure that we're seen as harmful professional people who do nothing but harm people and clients. Who they're really after, however, are people of faith. They're really not after therapists. We learned this a long time ago. They are after therapists, but they're more interested in demolishing people of faith and the standards of faith that says homosexuality simply is not something that is created by God, and that it's not intended for the design of men and women. And so they hate us for that. There's no real efforts I've seen with very many people on the left who are, at least who are activists, that will even bother to look at the unbiased information that conflicts with their own viewpoints. We give them plenty of room for understanding them and hearing what their arguments are, but they don't usually return the same to us. They're generally very militant people who are very insecure with their own belief system because they can't handle anybody with with an opposite viewpoint. So I would always get away from the term conversion therapy and just call it something simple like change therapy, just something simple. After all, good therapy is just therapy. We don't convert anyone. If you're speaking about a professional therapy, we don't convert them. We have them go through processes that is based on the client's belief that their homoerotic issues or their gender dysphoria is not genetic, that is created by trauma, usually always in childhood. And when those issues resolve, change, even though it's a very long story short, change happens automatically. Because we're working with who the client believes they are. No therapy should be given to somebody who believes that they're born gay or born with dysphoria. It wouldn't work anyway if that's what they firmly believed. So that's a little bit about how to approach this topic of conversion therapy. The whole thing is based on a foundation of a belief system. If you believe you're born gay or born the opposite gender, then there's nothing you can do. But if you don't believe that, then your entire world can change if you're doing therapy that's really expert and filled with compassion and expertise. And that's what our clients are saying. And people on the left, generally speaking, on the left, they don't want to hear that because they have to uphold their worldview at all costs. And it's quite, their language in dealing with them has been quite vociferous. So I'm really glad for organizations like IFTCC and therapists who do what they do, and for the Alliance. And anyone can go to those websites and find out all the information they need to. If they need documentation or research things or anecdotal evidence or how to answer all these questions you're asking today, they can just email me from my website, and I'm also happy to send them anything that they need to deal with this, whether it's personally or politically or professionally.
And I think that's really fantastic, because I think most therapists don't have to battle with the politicization of their work. And it's almost like if you're working in this remit, not only are you trying to help the population, but you're also trying to fight politically for people's rights. And like what you've mentioned, the support that you've mentioned is we're very grateful and very invaluable for you to do that, and really thank you for that. So moving on, I'd like to discuss, because a lot of people watching would be interested in the different types of therapy, which are, as we mentioned above, previously, reintegrative therapy, image transformation, ImTT, and not only are you providing a public information on, kind of like, or the misinformation which is being kind of spread. One of the reasons for the Alliance or the IFTCC is actually to improve the therapeutic effort to find, to research, and to come together to say and to understand our sexuality, our sexual fluidity more. So I know Joseph Nicolosi was a big fan of EMDR. And you read his books and he's very much into it. And obviously that comes from a trauma-based approach, and again, as you said, going back into childhood and seeing what happens in childhood, but also there's now new or further research in ImTT or reintegrative therapy, and I know in the conferences people bring new kind of techniques, new approaches. So obviously, even if you'd like to pick one of those approaches and kind of maybe go around and kind of offer a little flavor of what that might look like if someone would like to have one of those therapeutic approach.
Okay. Any therapeutic, what I'm going to tell you are based, of course, on my opinions and my experience.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll just start off by saying that for these particular issues of sexuality or gender dysphoria, we're going to assume that those issues are not genetic, that they're emotionally based, and that they're basically, to make a long story short, trauma based for various reasons. So when you know that or believe that, then in principle, therapy is actually in principle quite simple. If you resolve the underlying traumas, the symptoms of homosexual feelings or gender dysphoria naturally dissipate, or at least significantly reduce. Well, that's exactly what I would say 95% of my clients experience, especially because of the new therapy, which is the newest form of therapy is ImTT, image transformation therapy. And so we take the former processes of reparative therapy that Nicolosi invented, and what we're doing now is, even though that's a very effective process, because what it does, it helps a person navigate the underlying traumas that are underneath the sexual feelings and resolve that trauma so that those feelings naturally dissipate or reduce significantly. It's not a behavioral program at all. real therapy for these issues, in my opinion, must ultimately deal with the underlying trauma issues, or you're not going to be helped and you're not going to be helpful if you're a professional. You can do a lot of talking about it and a lot of historical good things to know and a lot of great principles to understand, but unless the client has an emotional experience of trauma resolution, and also that includes gender identity need fulfillment, like love and affection and approval and affirmation from same gender role models in their present day life, unless those issues are really addressed and fully fleshed out, in my opinion, long term, you're not really going to help anyone. But the good news is, especially with the new form of therapy in ImTT, that getting to resolution of those issues and actually experiencing change in one's feelings, even if it's only reducing dramatically those feelings in a natural way, is exactly what's happening with almost every one of our clients. And reparative therapy is based more on affect or more on the traditional talk therapy, which is wonderful. But I've noticed that when we add the piece of ImTT on, it's actually hard to believe how fast it is. All of us who've been trained in ImTT, which includes Nicolosi, by the way, we didn't believe this at first. We didn't see how it was possible for a significant or even permanent dissipation or reduction of homoerotic feelings could happen so quickly. But it does. I've been doing it for 3 years, and no one, not one client, has ever returned to the high level of homoerotic feelings that they had when they started. Every single client reports the same basic responses. So we think this is very universal. And the reason why is because we believe is because ImTT with image therapy in a very laser focused like way pinpoints the trauma like nothing else, and ends up taking down the emotional temperature of that trauma, and then is able to dissipate the trauma images from the mind and the emotions. And then the homoerotic feelings just quickly go away. Now it's not like one session and they're done. This is not a miracle pill. I don't mean to indicate that. But within a couple of sessions, once you're doing ImTT, the client will notice a dramatic level of drop of their homoerotic feelings on the specific images of homoerotic fantasy or pornography or similar that they've been working on. We're not saying this is a miracle that just wipes away in one day all the homoerotic feelings. But what we do is in theory, we process enough homoerotic images that are in the mind and heart, and there's a tipping point where it all tends to just be resolved. That tipping point is different for every person based on how much experience they've had with homosexuality, or in the case of dysphoria as well, but the principle is the same. Once you process an image, the homoeroticism for those specific memories tends to just go away. And clients tell us all the time, they say things like, I can't believe I don't have any attraction to that pornography anymore. That's amazing. And most clients are having the same reaction. So I want to be careful. I want to make sure that people are not hearing that there's some magic pill or a miracle, but the process is so attuned, in my opinion, to taking advantage of how we were created by God to get rid of trauma through imagery in the processes of the mind and heart, that it's so effective because we're like nothing else. We're so focused like nothing else, and it works more thoroughly and faster because of that. Now, that doesn't mean that there are not other aspects of other therapies that are really good, but in my opinion, the combination of these few processes that I've just mentioned are just having an incredible effect on our clients, and so we're very happy for them.
That's really good to hear, yeah, and it sounds like with the image you can bring the actual experience of the attraction to the session, and it's not something they have to think about and bring in. So they're actually looking at it. And yes, as you know, in faith, we believe men to be very visual, especially
Right.
men are quite visual in their approach. They see something and then, you know, they can work. And if they can work through the attraction in a controlled, therapeutic, safe environment, then it's probably easier to process those feelings and what's happening in their body and so on. And yeah, so yeah, I can definitely see how that can be a as you say, an accelerated approach, if you like, to bring the attraction into the session and for them to work through that. That's brilliant.
Absolutely. And what's necessary is a person does a lot better, a lot quicker if he gets rid of shame for just simply having temptations or feelings. So many people think they're these horrible people just because they have some feelings or temptations. I do my best to get rid of that with the client, because that just makes their process years longer, and it's a lot, and sometimes doesn't work because they're so filled with shame. So that's one of the traumas actually that we dissipate. So that's really important for people to hear. Also, let me give you an example of what therapy might look like. It's a very simple example. It's more complicated than this, but I think people who are hearing this today would benefit by an example if I can give you that. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So let's say, which would be very typical, let's say a 25-year-old young man comes in, and let's say he's sexually turned on by gay pornography, a naked man or whatever. Well, he feels those attractions. Okay. Well, in therapy, we find out that the issue that is driving that, which he wasn't aware of very much or at all, was actually his unconscious need to get his own sense of masculinity in his own body. Because when he was a child, he might have been bullied or not affirmed as a boy enough. And so there's a lack of masculine security in his own body. And it's usually accompanied by a deep sense of inferiority deep inside of him. And so his male programming, if you will, is blocked and unfulfilled. So the only other way to get masculinity, supposedly, is in the body of another man. And that's the moment when men's bodies turn into an object, therefore a sexual object. So in therapy, if you go down emotionally below to those wounds and heal the wounds of inferiority or feelings of not being man enough, and if he feels his own sense of maleness in his own body, then he looks again at those male pornography images, and the feelings go, because he's healing the trauma that has caused the attraction to those pornographic images in the first place. And so he finds his own sense of pride and masculine wholeness in his own body. And so there's no more need for the homoerotic feelings anymore. And that's why they just, at least in some cases, rather quickly dissipate. That need for masculinity is what we call a feeling state. A feeling state is just a normal need that, like masculinity, that all men have because they're men, that gets sexualized because of trauma. And that's what I described to you. So when we do that imagery process, it gets rid of the sexual connection automatically of masculinity and sex, and heals the trauma underneath that created that attraction in the first place. So I just thought everybody would want to know at least a basic practical example of that.
No, you've termed it really well on, you know, how shame brings in and really how that work is actually to do with building up someone's self-esteem, self-worth, and how they see themselves as men among other men, and kind of see what, you know, they're comparing, what are the comparings, and what are some of the beliefs that they have, about the negative beliefs that they have, if anything, the work is to bring them to a higher sense of self-esteem, even if they do have the attractions, and saying that's still okay. So if anything, the work is about reducing shame, reducing this concept of, oh, I'm other, or which is oddly enough what the LGBT think we're doing, is that we're putting them into
exactly. And that's a very important point. That's an essential point, because they can't handle it. Because when I tell these activists, and you over there can do the same thing, I would highly recommend it. You need to tell them that one of the main priorities, first priorities of all therapy that's really healthy, is to get rid of shame for having homoerotic feelings. And they won't be able to handle it. They won't be able to hear it, but they need to hear it. And you need to press that point upon them, because that's what reality actually is.
Absolutely. It's only when we start to say, yes, I have it and I'm okay with it. It's Carl Rogers' famous quote, isn't it? He says, then you're in the right place to accept it and then to change from that point on. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
You know a lot. You can articulate this extremely well. I admire that. I'm sure you're being of great help to people there.
No, and kind of thank you for summarizing it really well. We had our webinar, one of our webinars earlier was exactly on this, building self-esteem, because I don't know if you know, in the NHS, CBT is a very it's scientific, so they like it, the health service likes it, and they're like, hang on, what are you doing? And I said, one of the core things that we're doing is cognitive behavioral at the start, which is making them say it's okay, building that self-esteem, and then going deeper, as you said, into trauma, into the more psychodynamic work later on. But I think it's so important to mention the importance of self-worth, self-love at the start. And I know in some of your literature you put it as compassion, showing compassion, which I thought was really, really nice feature. So I know we can talk a lot. I just want to, there's quite a lot of us, and I had a lot of questions before as well. So I'm going to segue into Q&A. Before that, is there anything, and I know you've worked with the Muslim population before, or is there anything that you wanted to say or put out before we go for Q&A?
Yes, I just, maybe this is already something that everyone knows, but in my experience, I want to make sure at least that you hear me say, as one of the relatively well-known leaders of these issues, I want everyone to hear me say that these issues everyone needs to have a foundation that is rock solid and very simple. The foundation stone on which all this that we're talking about is based can be looked at, at least in some ways, as a very simple but very foundational thing to build upon. And that's why getting rid of shame is so important, because these issues really need, and in terms of what really works for men and women, in principle, it's really based on two profound concepts: compassion and truth. So if you're looking for truth but have no compassion, it's not going to be worth anything to you. It's not going to go well. But if you have a lot of compassion but no truth, it's not going to go well either. So I often talk about the twin principles of compassion and truth, which is, I think, what many faiths are built on. I know it is for Christianity, and I believe, at least I've heard that in terms of my Muslim clients as well, at least to a large extent. And so And everybody normally can accept those concepts. So if you always keep that in mind, plus speaking out to those issues in your own life, and taking charge of your own life to get compassion and truth, to look for what you need with no shame, to understand yourself thoroughly, and to go on that journey of the evolution of the strength and security of the authentic self. That's really what this is all about. And I want to be encouraging to all your audience who's looking and hearing today, because those principles, I think, are most inspiring, that one should never forget to really help you in times of discouragement as well. So I just thought everyone needs to hear first principles, and to really take courage and to seek after both of those things, truth and compassion, and it'll greatly help, I believe, in you living the life that you want to live.
I think that's really well put. And the intent is for people to find their own truth, and that self-awareness that the therapy or counseling offers, so they can find their own truth. And that's done in a setting where they're shown compassion, whatever that truth may be for them, and how they navigate through that. And it isn't biased political or religious dogma, as the the activists think that we've entered the or the therapist enters the session with a biased view on sexuality or whatever. And it's about helping clients find that true inner truth for them. Yeah, so I think that's thank you for that. I think that's really well put.
You're welcome.
So I can see already there's a lot of Q&A. So
Good.
just to introduce, so this is live. So just be aware, if you do want to ask a question anonymously, you can do that through the Q&A function. Also, you can upvote some of the questions. So if you already see a question and you're like, oh yeah, I'm not sure what that is, you can vote that up, and then we can start by that. There is also opportunity to raise your hand, and then we can also take questions by audio. So you can ask your question. Just be aware that your name would appear. So just be wary of that. Hopefully. So yeah.
Let me add one thing, if I may. Don't be afraid. I'm speaking to everyone. Don't be afraid to ask me any question you want. After 12 years, I've heard every possible question, and I think I can answer every possible question. If I can't, I'll tell you. But I want to encourage you to just ask anything you wish. You won't bother me in the slightest.
Thanks for making it so easy and welcoming, David. Really appreciate that. I'm going to start with there's a quick one in the chat. What is meant by image in the ImTT? So it's an acronym I use, isn't it? Image transformation therapy. That's right, isn't it? I've done it correctly, so I think that's that question. I'm going to go to the chat and then I'll go back to the Q&A ones. Hello, Ali and David. What about someone who does not hold any religious associations and believes that everyone should be free to be who they want to be, but due to reasons that include marriage commitments, a choice, wants to focus on healing to build up the heterosexual side of one's identity? Can therapy still work while respecting the LGBT community?
Well, the LGBT community would not think so, but I would, because my viewpoints are based on something that's foundationally different. See, the mere fact that we would, in other words, at a certain point, the LGBT community, based on their belief system, is going to always be in conflict with the non-inborn theory. 99.9% of LGBT people, in my experience, are always existing from the foundation stone of I was born this way, or God made me this way. That's diametrically opposed to what other people believe. So there's no way you're going to avoid that controversy. You're always going to have to deal with that. That's why I don't argue very much with LGBT folks when they're talking about some of the important but peripheral issues around sexuality and gender. I tell them right up front, look, we're coming from two different belief systems, so we've got to deal with that first. Yeah. And then maybe we can have more of a meeting of the minds. But right after that, I also include the conversation that says, your belief system, the entire world does not hold. And I suggest to the LGBT people, with respect, I suggest that they can't be bigoted or biased because other people really know that for them, that belief system does not describe who they truly are. So I'll do a lot of talking about that. And then more specifically to this question this person asked, if a person believes the LGBT inborn theory, I don't do therapy with them. It wouldn't work anyway. How could it? Unless somebody's really motivated or believes that for them it's not inborn. But a person doesn't have to be, on the other hand, a person doesn't have to be religious at all to benefit by resolving these issues, because these issues are emotionally and mentally based. So anyone could benefit from them as long as they believe that there was a possibility of resolving the trauma and the issues that are fueling the homoerotic issues.
Absolutely. And if we take this from a human rights issue, then every person should be given the choice to explore their sexual spectrum. I think more and more people are coming to the idea of sexual fluidity being a thing. So when they call it conversion, I always ask, well, why not the other way, right? So you can say, oh, okay, straight to or gay to straight is what they're trying to do, straight to gay. But when we're saying, well, if we know there's fluidity and someone wants to explore that, then where's this notion that sexuality is fixed if we know that there is people who are, I would say the B in the LGBT kind of gives it away that, there is a possibility, at least possibility, for attractions to change, or for to be at least a level of fluidity in some people in those attractions.
Right.
And it is quite funny here because they'll, even in the UK, they'll talk about affirmative therapy, gay affirmative therapy, and they're like, that okay, but hang on, isn't that biased? Because the therapist is coming in with a preconceived notion, like you say, an ideological view, which is diametrically opposed to someone else's view. They don't have to be of people of faith to say, actually, you know what, I've been in a marriage and suddenly I have these heterosexual attractions. I can't really say that I've just had an epiphany and I'm gay now. It's more to do with some attractions which I'm struggling with. So I think, that's put really well. So we'll move on to, hopefully we've answered that. Hopefully we can move on to some of the Q&A. Thanks so much for your amazing work, David. You're doing an incredibly amazing work for the community. Question, regarding the banning of change therapy around the world, would you say the underlying assumption of these laws is sexual orientation is immutable and inborn? Again, you've already said that, hence should not be treated. If so, how can this be the case? when there is no conclusive evidence that it is inborn. And then you've just mentioned that. And obviously we had the largest genome study done in the world for this, which identified there wasn't a single gene which would classify. I mean, they went into the aspect of biomarkers, and even that was quite weak. I think they were saying if you've got an elder brother, or kind of like there was like some biomarkers they were trying to put in. And when I read that, I was like, isn't that more environmental if you've got an elder? I just read that and I was like, so yeah, I think you've mentioned.
Well, let me mention this again. I'm really all about simplicity. All right. So when you think of it quite simply, this is what the other side is not telling you. Even the largest psychological association in the world, the American Psychological Association in America, they freely admit on their website that sometimes change is possible. And they believe that sexuality tends to be fluid, especially during teenage years. And they state that evidently, this is what I'm almost quoting them. They state basically that evidently sexuality might be due to some environmental issues and maybe have some genetic components. In other words, what are they telling you? They're saying, we don't know. That's the point, is nobody can prove anything. So how can you ban a therapy based on a client's sense of authentic self and autonomy based on his belief system that is not inborn theory? How can you ban a therapy when supposedly nobody knows where this comes from? Now, I have my own set of what causes it. I do have strong beliefs on what causes homosexuality, but I'm not going to infringe on somebody else's right, like the LGBT caucus does, to believe what they feel they believe. So people need to know that about what the APA is actually really saying. They've never declared it. Even just this week, they've come out with a new statement, and they've never declared change therapy as actually unethical. They don't approve it, they're against it, but they're very smart. They've never declared it unethical.
How can they, when they determine what's good for the client, isn't it? Absolutely.
Right. They know they're on dangerous ground when they do that. Absolutely, yes. So is the UK now.
Yes, and the UN at this moment as well, yes. What a wonderful insight. This is the next question. But these therapies are expensive per se. Is there any ongoing fee or low-cost therapies? I live in California and I'm unemployed. I'm so glad, whoever asked that, I'm so glad they asked that. So let me just answer that simply by saying, no, there's not. However, when a person in a financial condition with that situation contacts a therapist like me, we'll talk to them about their motivation level. We'll talk to them about the possibility of a lower fee. We'll talk to them about the possibility of how much therapy they might actually need, or work out, in some cases, a system where the need is very clear. Because at least in America, we're required to give a certain amount, it's subjective, but a certain amount of pro bono work. Like, for instance, I have just a few clients who I've given a drastically lower fee to. Now, I can't tell you what any other therapist would do, but what I'm saying is that it would probably be worth a try to contact your therapist and see what they might be able to do for you. The other way you can do that, because I think this therapy works so well and is so effective, especially the newer form of therapy, is budget their time and money. I don't mean to sound rude, and I don't know anybody's financial picture, but if it were me, I would do all I can. But for such important issues that are a lot more important than cars and homes and things like that, to do anything I could to, if it's possible at least, to get
finances to where I could have therapy. But there's also other resources like churches. Some of my Christian clients and some of my Muslim clients both got financial support from their religious communities, and that helped bring down the cost. So hopefully that helps to hear that.
Yeah, and hopefully that answers. And yes, similarly in strong support, we do offer the initial consultation that we offer is absolutely free. And we do encourage people to read before there's so many books, good books which are out there. So then they truly know what they're going into, and they have a really good understanding and time for self-reflection. And we also have, like, in your faith group, some faith groups offer group work, which again can be very cost effective for a lot of people if people can't afford the one-to-one time. Yeah.
Let me mention one more idea, and this is a new idea, and I don't have time to pursue it myself because I'm overbooked every week of the year. I'm just extraordinarily busy, which is a good thing mainly. But one idea is, if there are people in the audience today or anywhere that want to treat that as that issue as an ongoing developmental good work that they can do, they can start to form coalitions or groups or fund pages on the internet to where they take in funds as a missionary basis or as a charitable organization, and to become an organization that asks for donations, where 100% or at least nearly 100% of those donated funds are used to pay for therapy who can't afford it. I would fully support that. In fact, if there's anybody out there who wants to start that movement, they can contact me. And I can't do the work, I don't have time, but if you're interested and want to do that work, I'll fully support you as much as I can, and maybe give you some ideas of how you could form that organization. And because we do need people to donate to such a worthy cause. That's just an idea.
Absolutely. No, thank you, David. The next question, David, I respect your work. However, I've met several individuals who've gone through reparative therapy, one who worked with Nicolosi for 5 years and then stated to have benefited gratefully. However, none have experienced permanent change. They claim change is quite temporary and they are still dominantly attracted to the same sex. What do you think?
Well, I'd be happy to answer that question. But the problem with that is I don't know what specific circumstances that you're talking about. Now, I have an opinion on that because I've seen the same things myself. So I'll give you my opinion, but I'm probably not going to be able to thoroughly answer it well because I don't know what those individual cases, I don't know where they got blocked. Okay. But in my experience, usually after a client has given up, or let's say there are basically several reasons why therapy may not work, especially over a period of time. One, obviously, is the expertise of the therapist good enough? In my opinion, there are some therapists who don't really do a good job over a period of time because of lack of training or a lack of expertise. We have to be honest with ourselves and take responsibility for that as therapists. So that may be part of the problem very easily, because that's the way it is with all therapies for any issue.
Yeah.
Then secondly, some of my clients, believe it or not, after a couple of years, stopped therapy. And they got some good out of it, but they really stopped. Why? Because I found out, and finally, in a what was hopefully a supportive way, revealed to them, or they came to discover that they really weren't all that motivated in the first place. Some guys come to therapy because they think they have to change, and they're so ashamed of themselves. and they never get rid of that shame, or maybe the therapist doesn't really understand how pervasive that shame issue is. And so they're constantly fighting and fighting and fighting, and they get tired of it and give up. And in my opinion, that's both the therapist expertise problem, but it's also a motivation problem. Some people discover, even after years of therapy, that they really wanted to be gay in the first place, and they just weren't being truthful with themselves. I've seen that happen. And then the third reason would be, in my opinion, that they discover that they're not ready yet to deal with the pain or the trauma that's underneath those feelings. And so some people go away from therapy or just give up because of that. And or let's say they haven't really realized yet how important it is that they get rid of the shame thing and access their, what happens is that they still come from a I'm powerless kind of a mindset, and unless that's changed through various ways of dealing with it, that has a tendency to block a lot of change experiences. So there's probably a lot more than that, but that's what I would say at this point, those basic reasons.
Yeah, the client has to be in the right state to be doing deep trauma work and have the safety to do that. Yeah,
here's another typical example. It's terrible, it's unfortunate, but it does sometimes happen. Therapists can't predict or see everything in their clients. So sometimes it's missed, where, let's say, I've had a teenager, a very young, underage guy, come from a very religious family. Well, it turns out after a few years that he didn't really want to be there in the first place, but he never let me know. And he was basically saying, yeah, this is great, this is good, whatever. And then we realized later that he really wasn't being true to himself. And sometimes children are like that. And so they decide that it's just too hard of a work, or they get discouraged, when in reality there's a deeper story to it. So as therapists, that's why we have to be even more careful that we're working on the authentic self when, especially, a child, or let's say a young man or woman, comes to therapy that have not really known a lot about themselves yet. So it can hopefully prevent that client from getting blocked from real success. But frankly, there will be some people in the world, let's just face it, let's be real, there will be some people who, for whatever reason, they just want to be gay. And so I'm not gonna stop them from doing what they feel they really need or should do.
Yeah. I mean, you can do your contracting at the start, you can do your informed consent, you can follow all the measures, but you will still find people who are secretly appeasing someone else through the process, and sometimes it's near impossible to bring that to light.
That's right. Yeah. Well, and that's why I'm such a big advocate, insistent really, that therapists get all the training they need, because for many clients, not everyone, but for many clients, these issues can be extraordinarily difficult and complicated based on the things that we've just talked about, especially. And so that's why I train therapists now. In fact, if there's any other therapists out there on this webinar, I've set up training sessions for what I believe is the most expert therapy in the world. And so they can contact me if they want training, because that's what I do now. I also train other therapists. I've just completed the first phase of training for 9 Muslim therapists from Turkey.
Wow.
And so they're doing great. So, a lot of times training is the issue.
And I think that probably highlights the fact there's a huge, especially in the Muslim world, there's a huge need for therapists, and because unfortunately of the politicization of this issue, it's not been possible for people who want to work in this field to get the appropriate training and the appropriate support because of the professional bans, if you like, around this, which
Right.
makes it harder for people to actually, for therapists to actually get the training that they
Right.
need. So I'm really glad to hear that, David. That sounds really good. So we've got another question. Let me just check on time. I think we're okay. David, what do you advise SSA individuals who desire therapy to address their sexuality? However, they may have issues such as bipolar, OCD, and other such mental health issues. Should they not deal with these issues first, or is there another method?
Well, let me ask that. That's a complicated question, but let me answer that as simple as I can. If you have issues, especially if a client has issues of suicidality or extremely heavy depression or borderline or bipolar issues, yes, generally I believe those aspects should be worked on either first or at least mainly, even though you might also do some reparative therapy for the sexual issues at the same time. Especially if there's suicidality involved, yeah, you always will want to address that first. And that's what I do. That's what I think most therapists in America at least would do. And so that's how we do it. But usually, in my opinion, those bipolar or depression, suicidality issues, they're intertwined with the sexual and gender issues as well. So I personally believe that you can work on both at one time, but for a while the more severe issues have to be prioritized mainly or first.
Thank you. I see we have a lot of ones in terms of our questions. I'm just going to go through. I think this one is one. There's a principle we live by. I'm valuable just as I am right now, unchanged, and even if I can never change. This is to dissipate shame and increase self-acceptance and love. But how do we reconcile the fact that we're trying to change our emotions because at the center of it, we feel it is wrong. At the same time, we're trying to accept ourselves as we are and respect the rest of the world. How do we balance two sides of the coin?
Let me give you a specific example, although that's another complicated question, and there probably is a million examples of how to do that. But let me give you one example to make it a very practical thing. Hopefully that'll help, okay? When a person walks into my office, let's call him a 25-year-old young man again, and he's got a homoerotic, strong desire for some man or a pornographic image. What I will invariably do is, as immediately as possible, take him to the underlying issue. And that underlying issue always, so far at least, involves a childhood trauma or unfulfilled need. So here's what being accepted for how things are today and also movement towards the future can look. If he comes in with that sexual desire, I encourage him to take a deeper look and try and ask him what's so attractive about that guy. And let's say, which is true for almost every male client, well, it's all about masculinity. And then I'll ask him, so what do you feel right now in your body about your own sense of masculinity? And he says, oh, I'm no good. I'm not manly. I'm not masculine. I'm defective. And I reach out with compassion to him. And I tell him, at least sometimes I'll be specific, and I'll tell him, you know what? I get how you are right now. I get it. I get that you're feeling a lot of shame about your masculinity right now. But I say, but I want to encourage you to accept the fact that you've had wounds in your childhood, which are most assuredly not your fault, because you didn't wake up one day and say, hey, I don't want to be masculine, usually. And so I want to encourage you to look at the whole picture. So take an honest look. of this severe sense of inferiority as a man that you're having. And look at how that came to be. And I want you to look at that boy, that 9-year-old boy, let's say, who was so wounded and bullied and or not paid attention to by his father or his brothers, who was not accepted. What do you feel about that boy right now? Sometimes they'll say, I don't like him, he's inferior, or even I hate him. That's a real serious case. But most of the time, those clients say, well, I feel sorry for him, I feel compassion for him. And then that client moves into a much fuller picture and a healthy emotional experience, that he looks at that boy, who's really the same person, obviously, as he is, and he begins to have compassion on that boy. And now he understands why he has these issues. And so that moment of compassion is a specific, and understanding is a specific example of how he can see what his issues are and accept that, but how he then can add on to that this compassionate truth that's revealed to him. And that compassion experience actually is what tends to resolve the inferiority in the moment. And then ironically enough, when he goes back to that picture of that sexual attractive guy, his attractions, because of that deep healing work with compassion and understanding, he finds that they've automatically lowered or sometimes just go away in the moment. So that's a specific example of how somebody can be accepted in the moment, but also through compassion and truth, facilitate a change experience. I hope that helps.
No, that's great. That's showing active, looking at the truth, as you said, and then showing self-compassion to ourselves for that. Thank you.
Yeah, and this is another simple truth. In my experience, the number one roadblock to all change of these issues is shame. And when I say shame, I'm not talking about guilt. We all do things of which we're guilty. When I say shame, I'm using it in the non-spiritual sense. I'm using it in the sense of a person who believes that they're helpless, hopeless, they're inferior, that they're worth nothing, that kind of shame. And so there's another reason why people and why therapists sometimes don't understand that things are not working well, because they haven't addressed the getting rid of the shame through compassion and truth level as much as they need to. And so this is what I basically tell everyone. Just to be blunt, therapy won't work if somebody hates themselves or is ashamed of themselves, where that colors everything. It won't work. So I'm very honest with them right from the very beginning. If they refuse to at least try to love themselves, then why would I waste their time and money? It won't work.
And talking about shame, our next question is what we often see. I'm curious about penis size. Does this make a guy homosexual? And obviously, there's a lot of penis envy in the psychoanalytic part. Yeah, how would you respond to that?
Is his question, does penis size indicate whether you're gay or not?
So he says, I'm curious about penis size making a guy homosexual. So I guess what he's saying is comparison, maybe.
Yeah, no, it's not penis size. It's worrying in a shame-based way about whether you're adequate as a man that can bring up automatic homosexual feelings.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I guess what maybe he's alluding to is our bodies and how we view our bodies, and whether we're, whether we have the acceptance with our bodies. Yeah.
Right. Penis size is not the main issue. The main issue is how you're reacting and what you're judging about that penis size. All right. If you feel like you're not a real man because your penis is not as big as some other man's, well, then you're setting yourself up for homosexual attractions for a guy who's got a bigger penis. But that's the same thing I was talking about a little while ago. If you can't find masculine wholeness inside your own body, no matter what size your penis is, then there's more of a chance of you eroticizing other men's bodies.
Thank you. It's a question on free sessions. I know we've answered that before. Same-sex attraction is 100% non-genetic, right? No one is born as gay or homosexual. Is there anything like hereditary? Are there any hereditary factors that we know? But I know we've touched upon this to say there's no conclusive evidence on that one.
Yeah, there's no conclusive evidence. But don't be confused. When you have to be really careful about what you're reading or what people are saying about hereditary influences. Hereditary influences is nowhere near the same thing as genetically immutable. They're two different things. So you got to be really careful. The kind of characteristics that may make a boy, let's say if it's a boy, the kind of characteristics that might be inborn that make homosexuality more of a possibility might be being born with a sensitive personality. But that's far and away different from a genetic certainty.
Yeah, no, we have things like intergenerational trauma, isn't it? Which is kind of another example of hereditary. And again, these are not, as we say, they're not genetic as much.
Yeah.
So we've got next question. David, how do you respond to those who reject this therapy because so many former therapists have left this field and now reject it, such as David Matheson?
Well, interesting you asked about David, because I know David personally, and I've talked with him personally for the past 20 years, and also lately, after he's decided to emphasize his gay personality. And I'm not going to give you specifics of why I believe this, because some of the things he went through are very personal. However, in my opinion, David dealt with everyone else's problems, but never enough of his own internal issues around masculinity and the need for male love and affirmation and approval. He knew it in his head, but I don't think he ever really got enough need fulfillment. And that alone, plus a lot of repressed trauma, which is what I believe, long story short, he went through, was that finally exploded in him, I think is what convinced him to go the other way. It's interesting because I know personally of clients who have experienced real and lasting change as his clients. And yet somehow he said, change really doesn't happen. Or no, actually he says that change can occur, but that it's no problem being gay either. It's a very, in my opinion, it's a very confused kind of position. So I'm not sure what the future holds for David Matheson, but the short answer to that question is, based on my experience, I don't think he's dealt with the inner issues that he's been dealing with for many years. He's been dealing with everyone else's issues instead of his own. That's my opinion. And
it sounds like, self-care for a therapist being so important in this.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people I know in their profession actually don't work with a client that they're triggered by. So a lot of people say, oh, I can't take those cases because I've gone through that in my life. But because as a consequence of the professional ban, the only people who are available for help are people who've gone through the issue themselves. Yeah. And I think that's highlights the oppression on this area. It would be a bit like saying, oh, I can only see a client, a therapist for depression who's gone through depression, right?
You're exactly right.
Yeah.
You're a very smart man. You're exactly right. Now, there are some therapists who are really not done with their issues enough. So yeah, in some cases, it's probably not a good idea. But there are cases where therapists have resolved those issues so profoundly that they can work with those clients. So I know of a few. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know, kudos to those and blessings be to those therapists who do the work while they had to go through it themselves, because it's not something which is easy to do. So we've got, I'll just check time, we've got a few more questions. And yes, I've got, if people do, I'll take a copy of this, and I'll also at the end, David has his contact details on his website, I believe, so you can contact him if, so I don't want anyone to be distraught by your question not being answered through this method. So next question, Nicolosi said the desire is to top is about punishing the little boy. I'm not sure I can relate to this. Can you explain what you believe it means psychologically to top? I myself wonder if it comes from the desire to beat the father. Then again, maybe it depends on whether the fantasy involves a gay, effeminate man being the recipient or a straight man being the recipient. Thank you. So it's almost like there's a power dynamic, maybe.
Yeah, but I'm not sure what the question is. That did you say talk? I'm not sure.
Sorry, top. You know, like top.
Oh, TOP. Yes.
TOP. Yeah. Sorry, it's probably the British accent.
Right.
So Nicolosi said the desire to top is about punishing the little boy. So he's saying he's not quite understanding what it means psychologically.
See, Dr. Nicolosi Sr. was my mentor. He's the one who trained me for many years. And so I'm the great benefactor of his marvelous work. And in fact, many of us are. All my colleagues that are reintegrative therapists, we've all been trained by him. And so before he passed away. So I don't think that's the only thing he said about that. He would have said a lot more about that specific subject. So let me explain what I think, and also which I do believe goes in line with what he would say as well. There's an unconscious desire for those who top other men to get back at the people who bullied them. And so, but there's a lot of other factors involved in that. A lot of times there's still mother issues that makes them go towards men anyway, because they've learned that women are horrible for some reason or whatever. And so they drift towards men. But there's also an unconscious desire, which is only one aspect of the sexual experience of topping. And it's what you'll usually find in a case like that a gay man who's topping doesn't really consciously think about, unless he learns something about himself through therapy. When you go below that sexual desire and look into his early childhood, you'll find that kid probably sexually abused by someone who taught him as a boy. And in some cases it happens, but it's rare, where a father takes sexual advantage of a stepson or a son. Actually, horrible to think that, but it does happen sometimes, or an older man who's a father substitute. And so in an unconscious sense, that boy might turn into a gay man who more or less tops other men, because it's a way of bringing retribution or resolution to that trauma without really resolving the underlying trauma. In that sense, the sexual desire can be seen as a pleasure principle that serves as an emotional anesthetic to resolve the trauma that's underneath that still remains unresolved, actually.
So it seems like there's several levels of transference there.
Yes.
Of what that power dynamic really means for that individual.
That's right. The secondary or maybe even primary reason why he's doing that, again, unconsciously, is because he still needed another man to love him. And that guy who tops that other man is probably, he's probably more conscious of his needs for love of a man. And so, but he's expressing it in this kind of traumatic dichotomous way that ultimately doesn't really work in terms of permanent happiness. But let's face it, the sexual desire is very strong. And when, but there's a lot of, there's other issues going on underneath that these men are really not aware of unless they explore that.
No, thank you, very well described there.
Yeah.
Just going to check, we're past 90 minutes. I'm going to take a few more questions. Is that okay with you? Do you want to take more?
Sure. No, that's fine. I'm happy to do that. That's fine.
Okay. So from your answers, it sounds like you're saying that permanent change is possible if the person is committed to it. Is this really possible? A lot of people say the feelings are always there, just lesser, which one chooses to ignore or not let it bother them as much.
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I would expect this question. I think we need to hear this question all the time to make sure we're honest with everyone. In my experience, it's kind of like Nicolosi as well. There's several groups of people that call their work successful. There's a group of individuals who have been so traumatized, they've never had any male love growing up at all, no affirmation, approval, and affection, that they're very happy to just experience a significant reduction, natural reduction in their homoerotic feelings, but they have no interest in women and they want to spend their lives getting male need fulfillment. They call that success. That's great. That's success for them. But they still have occasionally some maybe minor or maybe even significant homoerotic feelings. But they're so attuned to their authentic self and what those issues are really all about, they go towards the healthy male need fulfillment, and they call that success. Then there's a group of guys who either already have sexual attractions for women, or who are already married, or who very much want, that only they can determine, a relationship with a woman. They want to have a family and children, and to know what it is to love and be in love with a woman and live their lives that way. Those guys usually are a group of guys that have either no homoerotic feelings after several years, or they still might come up, but they're almost nothing. They're not even worth talking about, because that person has become so advanced into their authentic selves in terms of their own sense of masculine wholeness and confidence. In short, they've resolved so much trauma that there's very little. Then you've got some guys who may or may not have relationships with women, but their work has been so profound, so transformative, that they never or hardly ever have any homoerotic feelings. I don't think one is necessarily more successful than the other. I just think it's important that we discuss what reality looks like in these several groups, because in any group that may feel marvelous to you. And so, great. In the end, it's about what each client can experience for them and what success means to them. But to answer the question in a very short way, success means a little bit different things for different individuals based on what their life experience is and what they've chosen to do about it and how they've worked in therapy and their experiences.
Absolutely. And it's, we mentioned a point earlier about having, asking of goals at the start of what does success look like, so people know, and also kind of like we say, anything which kind of delivers a promise or at the end isn't, it should really be coming from the client. And also, as you mentioned, again, I don't think any therapy can completely just wipe everything clean. you know, and we need to kind of admit to the fact that the attractions for a lot of people, at least in the population I've seen, is that first they start off saying, oh, I want everything gone, you know, and then as they're maybe a bit more mature in their journey, they realize, oh, actually it wasn't just the attractions, it was so much more than that, which I was trying to look to. And then their goalpost almost changes slightly when they're in the journey, because when you're starting, you think, oh, I want all of it away. But then when you've done the work, the trauma work, and then you have that self-compassion, then you think, oh, actually, maybe I needed that bit of pain. Maybe I needed that bit of life lesson, however you want to put it, to then have the self-awareness that I have now. And that's true for any therapeutic setting. So yeah.
To me, that describes success. We're not describing success, and don't let any LGBT activists tell you that you do miracle therapy where it's just from gay to straight in 5 easy sessions. That's ridiculous. And we're not claiming that. No therapist should claim that kind of thing, as you've just illustrated. But to explain to them what I do to address that is I tell them I can't guarantee anything, of course, but I say there's a good chance that you can experience a lot of healing and change the issues that you're dealing with, because here's what my clients are telling me. I'll tell them what my clients are experiencing, but I won't tell them what they must experience or guarantee anything to them. That would be foolish. But I will tell them honestly what all my clients are saying. And especially with the ImTT process, I've never seen anything affect a person so much where there's more of a chance now. Much more of my clients now, many more of my clients are except for a few isolated cases that I think is actually about motivation, that kind of thing. I would say about 95% of my clients, in the worst case scenario, and I'm just reporting to you what they're telling me, about 95% of my clients, the worst case scenario for them is only experiencing a natural and significant drop in their homosexual feelings. Most of my clients at least experience that. Well, that's because of the therapy and my expertise, but also this added ImTT piece, in my opinion, because it's just made such a huge difference with clients across the board. So I'll tell people that, but I'll also tell them that, you know, I can't guarantee anything. I'm just telling you what my clients are saying.
Yeah, and that just shows the great work that you're doing, that it's definitely client-centered. If you're having happy clients at the end, and I'm sure the audience can look into ImTT further and see that method as something to research further on.
It's online. They can look up the website. It's, in fact, I'm pretty sure the website's on my website as well. It's imttherapy.com.
So it's image transformation therapy. Is that right? Image transformation therapy.
Right. But the website URL is www.imttherapy.com.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you for that. Maybe one or two questions.
Sure, that's fine.
What do you think about the notion there's a big difference between sexual orientation and sexual feelings? Therapists like Dr. Joe Court believe sexual feelings can change over time. However, orientation is fixed and innate.
See, to me, that's a nonsensical statement.
Yeah, I'm not understanding that.
I'm not putting.
Yeah.
I'm not putting anyone down for asking that question, but Dr. Court, who says that, it sounds confusing, because it is confusing. Yeah. So we need to define what we mean exactly by sexual orientation. He won't find any genetic foundation for sexual orientation. So to me, it's a moot point. It's really talking about the same thing.
Yeah, and it's this whole concept again of identity politics, where sexual orientation is, when we say sexual orientation, we say I'm heterosexual and I'm 100% heterosexual, and we know, through that just isn't true.
That's right.
And we have different sexual feelings. Everyone has different sexual feelings.
That's exactly right.
So I think I concur with that being a bit confusing. So I think final question, and what I'd like to, I'm going to copy paste these ones, and hopefully, I think David's come in and we probably had the highest number of questions on our webinar. So you can take that accolade away from, at least from the webinar, that you certainly kept the discussion going. What is the best way to get affection from men in the healing process without directly asking for it?
Without what?
Without directly asking. So I want to get affection, but I can't really ask for it. I think it's a really good question. You often get that.
It is a good question, but it's a loaded question, if you know what I mean by that. I don't think there's anything wrong with you asking for it specifically. Here's what that might look. Now, I'll talk about other ways in just a moment, but here's what it might look like. Let's say I've developed a new friendship or an old friendship in a much more close-knit way. And let's say there's a lot of healthy male love between you and a male friend, or maybe an older mentor. I don't think there's anything wrong at all with that person who has some SSA attractions to reveal to that person, that other man who presumably cares about him, to want to have a conversation about him and to tell him some things and some of the needs that he never got in childhood. It might look like this. Let's say his name is, I don't know, John. That man might tell John, you know what? Our friendship is so strong. There's some things I want to tell you about, some issues I've had ever since childhood, because they're important to me. Can I talk to you about that? John will probably say yes. And in the course of that conversation, that man can ask John at a certain point, well, I never knew what it felt like for my own father to put his arms around me and hug me, just a simple act of affection. And, I have such great affection for you. Sometimes I feel like reaching out to you and hugging you. Are you okay with that? Well, you can do that. You don't have to do it that way, but that's one way that a person could actually ask for what he needs, but he builds up the friendship first. Another way to do that non-verbally, if you absolutely don't feel like you can do that, is to have experiences with other men. Because when men work or play together, they're usually automatically, naturally, physically gravitate towards each other and touch each other, sometimes in playful ways, and sometimes they'll just hug each other. Like, I'm sure all of you have seen the football competitions. Those guys are all over each other, sometimes hugging them and kissing them. So you find ways to do that. You have fun with other guys, and you walk up to them and give them a hug. And then later on, you can tell them, if you want to, hey, that means so much to me. I didn't get hardly anything in my childhood, and I want you to know, I don't mean anything weird by this, but that means a lot to me. The fact that you accept me, and I'm just going to hug you sometime. Something like that is a good idea. But also when men work together on projects, when they're doing serious things together, sometimes it brings them closer naturally, automatically. Excuse me. They'll bump into each other or work with each other, and their bodies will touch. And that person who has SSA will probably, hopefully, feel, if they know what they're doing, is feel how important that is to them and how much that means to them. And they'll love that opportunity, and they'll gravitate towards that. It can be a natural thing. if you get very actively involved with other men, which I always highly recommend. This work is also about everyday need fulfillment that you never got in childhood. As much as possible can be done.
Absolutely. And I guess it's being truly masculine means you can be vulnerable in that state and then say, you know, I think a lot of men find it hard to say, I love you, bro, you know, or to make that, or to say that, or even to call out to help and say, I'm going through a difficult time, and I really appreciate your love and affection, you know,
yes.
In this. And yeah, as you put, like supposedly these footballers who, you know, they're every child wants to be like. You see them having a very strong sense of physical, verbal affection, and yeah, I think that's put.
Yeah. See,
really
to me, that is heterosexuality.
Mm-hmm.
It's been to the world's, especially America's, great detriment over the past 150 years, where men have not done that. And we've lost something because of that. 150 years ago, American men, they'd be so affectionate with each other, you'd swear they were gay. But it changed in the early 1900s. I can go into a lot of reasons why, but it'd take too long of a story.
Absolutely. And, you know, even our faith, the concept of brotherhood is time and time again that the importance of strong communities, strong men, strong brotherhood is so important.
Yes, this is really important, that men or women who are dealing with these issues, that they keep these needs in mind. In my opinion, if you have these issues, those unmet needs that you're trying to get filled, at least as much as possible, which should be wonderful to you, those are non-negotiable needs. Non-negotiable. In my opinion, they are just as important as food and water. Why? Because God created you for male need fulfillment. Why? Because, like it or not, you are a man. And to fulfill that manhood need fulfillment is absolutely necessary. So when you don't lose sight of those, and you stand up for what you want and need and be assertive with that, it'll take great courage, but nevertheless, when you seek out that, then you're going to always do yourself a great thing if you will constantly be aware of how that journey, even though sometimes difficult, is important to you. You'll do very much better if you always keep that in mind.
Absolutely. As you said earlier, SSA is only the sexualization of a non-negotiable need. So it's, you know, it's the need's non-negotiable, and that's why it feels so as if it's coming from within. But because we've sexualized it because of our circumstances, then that appears that way. So thank you, David. Honestly, there's like we've answered 12. There's like 41. Oh my God, there's 41 questions. So what I'm going to ask is, how can people contact you, David?
Just email me. Yeah, just email me from my website. Just go to davidpickuplmft.com, which I think you have that for them already, and just go to the contact page and email me from there, and I'll be happy to answer any questions you've got.
Yes, no, thank you. And if there's anything from our side, if there's any, I think there was maybe some questions here which I've copy pasted, but if there's any messages, I think there was a message for collaboration in Santa Clara. Please do reach out for me, or if you want to reach out for me in another setting, if you don't feel comfortable in talking in this setting, you can email us strong support, contact strong support.
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And one more thing, again, those of us who are doing this work, we're all overbooked every week. We need more therapists, especially women therapists, by the way, who can handle women's issues more than, let's say, than we do. So if anyone there in the audience knows of any therapist that needs training or wants to talk about how they can help this population of men in highly expert ways, tell them to don't hesitate to contact me, because I'm setting up trainings right now for the year, and I'll be happy to talk with anyone who wants to, if they're a licensed therapist or psychologist or psychiatrist, whoever, if they want to receive training, because I'm very interested in training more and more people.
Fantastic, yeah, and as you see, you said, we definitely need the demands a lot more than what we can
Yeah.
provide at present. So yes, no, thank you for that. Hopefully our next webinar, we continue with this Q&A journey. We actually will be joined by Andrew Rodriguez, which we actually started our first ever webinar series back in 2020. So he joins again, and we had a similar conversation with him where there were too many questions, so he actually had to do 1 hour questions on his YouTube channel to address the remainder of questions. So hopefully we'll do something similar next month. You can look out if you want to register for that. Then on the website there's our mailing list, which you can add to, or any of our social media channels, which you can also follow to get updates if you would like to register for the next webinar.
Great.
So hopefully this has been useful. I'd like to thank the audience. We've had a wide variety of people from across faith settings and non-faith settings. We've had therapists as well in this call, and I want to really thank and give hope to the people from this. If you are worried about the legislation and so on, and we can already see it's not as easy as they as they make it, as they think. And we have great people like David who are here to help support, and they've seen it all in the States. They've seen, and there's material which is there and available for help. So don't, if you are worried or you're concerned, please do reach out or do contact us if you do need any support. I'd like to thank David again, because I know he is a very, very busy man, and really thank him for giving his expertise and his time and blessings to the work that you're doing in your community, from a political standpoint, from an activist standpoint, from a therapist standpoint, and from a training standpoint as well, because obviously we need the next generation of therapists, next generation of psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and other fields to kind of help this population, God willing. So thank you so much, David, and thanks everyone. God bless.
Thank you. You're very welcome. Bye-bye.